Today on Small Changes, Big Shifts, I've invited one of my friends as well as one of my mentors, Mary Lucas, to share with you. I met Mary on a whim. I was reading her book, Lunch Meat and Life Lessons, A Butcher's Daughter, while I was at the lake one summer. And I actually just emailed her and said, God, I love your stories. I love your style. Would you consider coming to talk to my team at Your Wellness Connection? To my surprise, Mary emailed me right back, and she is from Kansas City. And so she came over and shared with my staff, and we have been fast friends ever since. Every time I'm with Mary, I get tons of wisdom. At the same time, lots of good laughs. You're in for a soulful Small Changes, Big Shifts today. Stay tuned. Mary Lucas, welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm excited to be with you.
Well, I just
always.
As I said in the intro, you always make me smile, and you just have become a mentor of mine. So thank you for that. So tell our listeners a little bit about your story.
Well, I was born number 9 of 10 children to John and Mary Bickelmeyer of Shawnee, Kansas. And that really is the beginning of my story. When we said our prayers at night, we'd say, God bless Joan, Judy, Johnny, Jimmy, Joey, Jerry, Jeannie, Jane, Mary, and Barbara. And so, growing up number 9 of 10, and first, probably people always ask, why weren't you a J? And my mom's name was Mary, and she was 40 when I was born. And so they decided to name me after my mom. And then my little sister Barbie came along, and they never got their Jeff. They were going to name a boy Jeff if they got him. So the last 2 are named after my mom and me, and my sister Barbara is named after my dad's oldest sister. He was one of 10 as well. So that's really the start of my story. You grow up with all these people, sister old enough to be your mother, and, my parents were maybe a little tired by the time I came along, I could say that. And so I think I had the best of everything, being at the tail end, because they just loved me. And so that's really the start of my story. And I grew up with this loving family, but then I ended up going off to K-State. We were all first-generation college graduates, and I was always close to my mom growing up. I think I was a bit of a girly girl, and I just was close to her. She was an only child who had 10 kids. And my father, on the other hand, was one of 10 children. And my mom was really quiet and kind of, just loved us. And my dad was like a philosopher, city philosopher. When he passed away, I know our neighborhood paper, the Shawnee Journal, said Shawnee was a city philosopher. So when he died, it was after my mother had passed away. And I had 2 children of my own and married my husband, Scott. And I wanted my boys, as a parent of only 2 children, I wanted my boys to know the legacy of my father and the way he shared his wisdom. And I decided to write a book. And I wrote a book called Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons. My father was a butcher, by Mary B. Lucas, B.D. He's the founder of Bickelmeyer Meats in Kansas City, Kansas. And the B.D. stands for Butcher's Daughter. I wrote the book for my boys, Chase and Nick, so they would know their grandpa the way the other grandchildren did. Good news about being number 9 of 10 is you're kind of left alone as you're growing up, and you're just loved. And the bad news is your children will never, ever know their grandparents the way the other grandkids did, because they're at the tail end. So I wanted my boys, Chase and Nick, to know their grandpa. So I wrote a book, Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons, about him. And I gave it to all my family on what would have been my dad's 90th birthday. And I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. People all around Kansas City started getting it, which, wanted the book and sharing the book. And then it started going outside of Kansas City. And now, 62,000 copies later, I've been able to speak about the book and my father's wisdom all around the world. I've been to Ireland, to England, and last week alone, I was in McKinney, Texas. I'll be going to Las Vegas in 2 weeks, and, just all over the place. My husband and I love it. It's a fun way for us to travel. Our boys are both grown and gone now, so I get to keep my father's legacy alive. And the epitaph on my mom and dad's tombstone is, to live in hearts we leave behind means not to die. To live in hearts we leave behind means not to die. And so my father's legacy lives on, and I'm inspired every day when I get a chance to share his wisdom. So that's my story, Michelle.
Well, I think that today, one thing I want to focus on our time together is really parenting. And I think that it's a tough job. And I think that every parent would hope that their child would say, how do we keep that spirit in their lessons alive? And I know you're doing that for your father and inspiring other people at the same time. So I'm curious, and take this from a parenting spin. What does well-being mean to you?
Well-being, I think, to me means happiness. I think if you're happy and if you are, I think my dad would say, and this is, again, I refer back to a lot of his quotes, but it's not the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness in the pursuit that inspires you, that keeps you going. And so I think I love doing and I love watching, with my boys, they're very active and always doing something physically or mentally or challenging themselves in a lot of ways. And trust me, again, I feel funny talking about parenting because you're never done, and now my boys are 25 and 23, and it's just a different type of parenting. But I think watching them and doing things with them and the way we connect is by, traveling, going places now and doing things together. And if we're happy when we do that, my husband just turned 60 and we had a trip to Colorado and we did zip lines right across, over 7 falls. And I think it was one of the best. We always say this, that was one of the best trips we've ever done. But it's just, what's the next thing we can all do together? And just experiencing things together. And I think that for me, I think well-being is happiness, and happiness is I'm happy personally in the pursuit, kind of in the doing and being active. So that's what comes to mind when you ask that question.
Gosh, when you say that, I think of the word showing up. I'm preparing a talk in just a couple weeks, and I think the big thing for me, I thought, it's showing up for yourself, but also showing up for others. And
yes,
so
I love that. I'll borrow that one from you.
Yeah,
showing up,
making
the most of the moment. I think that's part of what showing up is.
Well, that's all we have is these short, simple moments.
I think that the other part of that, when you said that, I think the other thing that I think is so important when it comes to well-being is your attitude and an attitude of gratitude. That to me is part of, when you go around, and I see this all the time. I've been in the people business, as my dad called it, but the staffing industry my entire career. And there are people that feel like things should come to them, that they are, that they're, and entitled is the wrong word, but there are people, I think sometimes when you work with the people that are grateful for anything that comes their way, it's so much more rewarding than the people that kind of expect. And I think when you start with an attitude of gratitude with any kind of interaction or relationship, you're grateful for the moment, or grateful for the time, or grateful for what good came out of it. I think that's really powerful in terms of your overall well-being.
Well, it's interesting, as we've talked on small changes, big shifts this last year, when I challenge people to leave a small change challenge, what can our listeners do? I would say that most of the speakers, people sharing their story, talk about gratitude. So I think you're right in the line. I think it's a good message for the listeners to hear. Gratitude is so important, and probably at the one of the top things you can do to really have a phenomenal life. So let's take the conversation. What small change, big shift has changed you the most? It's probably very hard to answer, but what one comes up in the moment right now?
Honestly, being a parent, becoming a parent. You said earlier that you kind of wanted to focus on parenting. The biggest shift in my life was when it wasn't just all about me. That was one of the big, I think, and then I think that after becoming a parent, that creating that legacy, or wanting that legacy of what I grew up with to live on, that was a small change. Was writing down my dad's wisdom. A big shift was what became of it. I think for me, carrying it on and making it more than just my family or just my boys. That was, I never intended. I say this all the time. I'm an accidental author, but I'm an intentional communicator. I wrote for my family, for my boys, but I continue to share the legacy and the wisdom because of the shifts I see occurring in people when they take it in. and that's very rewarding for me.
Doing your part. It's interesting you say about the legacy. And I was at one of my friends' mother's service, celebration of life, earlier this summer, actually. And I think so many times you focus on, not you, I probably focus on some of the things that I didn't get from my parents, which I think a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I really sat there. And as I left that day after hearing her story and then being so intimately close to my friend Russ and watching the gifts of who he has become, it just wasn't far from his mother. And so I remember leaving thinking, you know what, there's some gifts that I really got from my mother. And it's a good time to say thank you, because my mother's still alive. My mother was a connector. And she didn't know a stranger. And she's probably more outgoing than I am. But I remember as a kid, if let's say she went to the grocery store and she saw this family that needed a place to stay, she would invite them in. And mind you, we grew up very, I'd say probably upper, lower class. So we didn't have a lot extra. We had enough, but not a lot extra. But we always had somebody staying with us that needed a place. And so for me, it's easy to say, oh, you need something, come on over or take this. And I think that gift of generosity and connection, I attribute to my mother. And so it's been nice to really focus on the good things that she has planted a legacy in me on.
I think I hear that all the time from people where, maybe because I wrote a book about my dad, there's this assumption that it was this perfect upbringing, idyllic upbringing. I don't know if I said that word right, but I always make sure people know, we were a functioning dysfunctional family. I don't know a family that's not dysfunctional. I've never met one. We were, and yes, I had an incredible father and mother that because I chose to look at what their positive attributes, exactly what you just described, because I chose to look at the things that I got from them. And I think I learned that from them. Yet there were a lot of things, like I said, growing up number 9 of 10, they weren't at all my events, or they weren't. I could focus on those things, but instead, I think because of the lessons I learned from them and from honestly, my sister Joan and my sister Judy were old enough to be my mother. And they were mothers as well in a way. And, my mom would always say, we all raised each other. There were things that, my sister Barbie and I were, Barbara, she likes to be called Barbara, Dr. Barbara Bickelmeyer. So I call her Barbie every chance I get. But she, we didn't get along very well growing up, and now we're the best of friends. And I look at that and I think, it was that persistence of my dad would always say to us, the greatest gift, his mother on her deathbed died at the age of 42. She told my dad and his siblings, the greatest gift I can give you is each other. And I think that, so obviously that attitude of gratitude and looking at, the positive, even though they were so poor. And it was a depression, and my dad had to quit left 8th grade and went into Kansas City to work in the meat business and send money home to help raise his brothers and sisters, and there could have been this woe and me attitude. And yet it was, always looking at what positive came out of something. That he lost everything in the 1951 flood. And that's one of my favorite stories. He said, good luck, bad luck, who knows? He said, out of that, lost everything. I ended up, being eligible for government loans, that I then bought a lot of real estate, which then turned down into an income stream that I never would have imagined. Here this guy with an 8th grade education, left this world a very wealthy man, not just financially, but because of the legacy he created. So I think always looking for what you get from someone, not what you don't get from them, I think is a powerful shift as well. So thank you for sharing the story of your mom, Michelle, too.
Yeah, she's lovely. So when we think about small changes, big shifts, I try to focus on a few key areas. I think that there's so much noise out there about what else you could be doing, especially in the health and wellness space. But I like to encourage people to celebrate where they're at and celebrate the good things they are doing. So would there be something that comes to mind when I say the word celebrate, encouraging our listeners right where they're at? You got any stories for that?
Yes. Celebrate every chance you get. That comes to mind. they think, and I might say one bad word now, but I remember one time I was a bit of a martyr, and I came home, and nobody at work remembered my birthday. And I came home, it was the first year right out of college, and no one remembered my birthday. And I remember driving home. I can't believe they didn't remember my birthday. It was on my application. They should know my birthday is March 24th. I can't believe it. And I went home, and I was going home to my parents' house for my birthday dinner. And my mom was up at Hy-Vee, and she was getting a loaf of bread. And so I walk in, I smell my favorite meal cooking, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, corn. And I walk in, and Dad's sitting at the butcher block table. And he said, "How's your birthday, girl? How's your birthday?" And I said, "Horrible." I started crying. "They forgot my birthday at work." And I said, "I can't believe they forgot it." And he looks over at me and goes, "Well, you're not going to get any sympathy here. If you don't have a happy birthday, it's your own damn fault. You should have told him a week ago. My birthday is next Wednesday. You should have told him last time. My birthday is tomorrow morning. What are we doing to celebrate my birthday?" Don't you ever wait for somebody to celebrate you. Celebrate yourself. You can bet ever since that day, I will never forget that lesson. I have the best birthday. And I kind of like you, Michelle. I know what you do too, but I tell people a month in advance, my birthday, or it's my birthday month, it's my birth month, and here's what we're doing. And I throw my own parties, and I make sure I have a great day. So and I think that whole celebrate every chance you get, and it's up to you to make the celebration happen. It was a powerful lesson that I live to this day. Anybody who knows me can tell you I do that.
Celebrate every chance you get. That's a great reminder. The next part is really giving some guidance, and I think one of the greatest gifts as being in the positions we're both in is we're giving people guidance, and they can either take it or not take it. They can hopefully go through their own filter and say, "Oh, that resonates with me," or it doesn't. What kind of guidance would come up for you today that we've not already shared?
Nobody makes you happy but yourself. I think it's just kind of a follow-up to the celebrate every chance you get, but nobody makes you happy but yourself. It starts with you. It starts with me every morning, and I think that's, to me, that was what came to mind the minute you asked that question. And sometimes, honestly, I have to work on it. I moved my youngest son to Chicago this week, and I'm more than a little melancholy this morning, missing him. Yet I know that, I got to look for the positives out of that, and nobody makes me happy but myself. So I got to figure my way through it, and I will.
And do you have a ritual, or do you have some little, I know I have some thoughts and some quotes that I say in my head, speaking of birthdays, I posted 50 quotes that have inspired my first 50 years leading up to my 50th birthday, April 1st, because our birthdays are close to each other. And there's some thoughts that I have that run through my head, or some quotes to keep me in the game. Do you have anything like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think part of it for me is I guess as far as a ritual, I don't have a ritual. I just have reminders. And I think when there's little things, like when someone starts to get on my nerves, or there's a little bit of, and I know this maybe sounds a little bit like a Southern thing or whatever, but the minute someone starts, I think, oh, someone's, crabby in the line, or we travel all the time. If somebody starts getting, mean, or my immediate ritual is bless his heart, bless her heart, honor her loving intentions. I don't know what happened to her today, but something must have happened to make her this way, or something must have happened to make him this way. When people start annoying me, that's my immediate thing is, seek first to understand that all. Bless his heart. That guy must have had a rough day. That guy must have a happy life right now, because he's sure taking it out on that flight attendant. Or I think there's these little things of that triggers in my mind that'll try to help me. Not that I don't get annoyed from time to time, but it's like I just try to go to that place first and think there must be something that happened to this person to make him, like this right now. And I don't know what it is, but bless his heart. So I think little things like that, and I have a bunch of them like that. I use Over the L, and we don't have enough time to tell that story, but when there's a long story about how my father used this phrase, over the L, Was kannst du gar nichts, my German is horrible. What can I do but nothing? Why let things you have no control over bother you? It's over the L. And if you want to know more about that, you ought to read Lunch Meat and Life Lessons because it's a great story. But that's the one. That's one of the triggers. Rental car line, out the door, over the L.
Okay.
Traffic, over the L. It's just like that's over the L. I'll remind myself, and a lot of my friends do it too. And then I have, find the like. I use that one all the time. Find the like. What is the good thing in this situation? My boys got tired of that too as they were growing up with different coaches or, that phrase, if you don't like somebody, they don't like you. Well, if it's a teacher, if it's your coach and you're stuck with them, instead of always talking about what's wrong with them, figure out what you like about them because, if you're not liking them, they're probably not liking you and it's not a good situation to be in. So there's tons of that I kind of go through in my mind all the time that I think over the years, and I'm a little older than you, but over the many years of my life, I've kind of figured out now that it's not worth it to get yourself all worked up over things.
Well, I think it's really a great segue to go to connecting because I really would encourage our listeners to follow you on Facebook. You always have some great blogs or as well as to go out and get your book. And how can they find your book?
They just go to Amazon and it's Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons. Or they can just go to Mary at maryblucas.com is my email address, or there's maryblucas.com is the website and there's ordering information there.
I have to tell you, and I said in the intro, I can remember exactly where I was sitting reading your book. And it's one of those great books where you just don't want to put down. It doesn't take a long time to read because you're so enthralled with the story. And I think you start seeing your own life in it as well. And I remember sitting there and just emailing you saying, oh my gosh, what a thoughtful book. And would you come share with my team? So I'm so grateful for our friendship. I'm
so grateful as well, Michelle.
Yeah.
In so many levels. I think you are such an inspiration to me. And I think on my wellness journey, and I think just all the ideas and things that I've learned from you. So when I count my blessings for connections, you are high on that list. So thanks so much for having me today and just for the friendship. I think the inspiration that you provide, I really value that. So thank you.
Well, as we close the show, I want to encourage our listeners, if you have heard something here today that resonates with you, feel free to share with your friends. We'd love it. We'd love to have a review and encourage you to follow Mary and myself on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. We're trying to spread the message of hope and healing. Mary, as we leave our last tidbit, we're going to leave a small change challenge to our listeners for the next week of something they can implement that will help them make small changes that will lead to big shifts. What would that be?
Celebrate every chance you get this week. Look for something to celebrate and do just that.
All right, you got your marching order. So look to celebrate, and I just encourage you once again to show up for yourself as well as showing up for others. And we'll chat with you next week on Small Changes, Big Shifts. Sending you big blessings.